Where is the wise man? That's what Roman Reigns wanted to know on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown, and there were quite a few developments on this show. As we know, heading towards the War Games match at Survivor Series, there was seemingly confirmation on who the fifth member is going to be for Solo Sikoa's version of the Bloodline, and there was also the tease at the end of Roman Reigns trying to get in touch with Paul Heyman. Quite a few options, I think, in play when it comes to what's next for the Wiseman. But let's talk about what we saw from the SmackDown. And yet again, it was kind of building towards this big match at Survivor Series, the Bloodline versus the Bloodline. And we start with what happened with Bronson Reed, because it does seem like it was all but, again, confirmed that Bronson Reed is going to be the fifth member for Solo Sikoa's team. Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and Bronson Reed is going to make up that team, at least the way they're pushing it right now. Could they swerve us and do something else? I suppose they could, but doesn't make a lot of sense after Bronson Reed just hit the tsunami on Roman Reigns and came in just on a path of destruction here. And, we kind of talked about this on the Raw reaction video on Monday. I said, the way they're building this up, Seth Rollins is kind of a central figure here, where he didn't just have the interaction with Sami Zayn in the back, with Sami trying to get Rollins to join the team, which we talked about. That's kind of an interesting choice by Sami, but it went beyond that. You had Rollins having the interaction in the parking lot with Solo and Jacob Fatu, and that should have kind of, I think, led us in a direction to make us understand that they're kind of putting Seth as, again, a very intriguing figure in this whole deal. And now to take it to this step where you have Bronson Reed coming out, destroying Roman Reigns, now it is set. And, I know there was some strong reaction from people who were wondering, okay, are you really going to put Bronson Reed and Seth Rollins into this thing just to make it 5-on-5 when you could have made it simply, Bloodline versus Bloodline, do the 4-on-4. You don't have to have the fifth member. And if you were going to have the fifth member, we talked about, it seemed like the options that would have made, the most sense in terms of looking at it from the story we've seen to this point was going to be, someone like The Rock, right, joining Solo's side, or having Cody Rhodes or CM Punk or someone like that. Cody's been in this for forever now, it seems like. He's finally getting out of it and has his own mess to deal with, which we'll talk about. But, CM Punk, a Paul Heyman guy, there were different, ideas you could work with there. But this does seem to be the route they're going. And again, I think that, this is a big opportunity for Bronson Reed. There's no other way to put it, right? It is kind of his first interaction with the Bloodline, minus what happened, again, on Monday's Raw. But I think, it's different because I think everyone was sort of set on this just being Bloodline only in this War Games match. Not going to be the case. You are going to have someone like Bronson Reed in there. But like I said, this is a huge opportunity for him. Look at what they've done with him over the past little while. They made him feel like a big star. And from the other perspective, if we know we're getting Bronson Reed in this, well, we also know that the likelihood of a Seth Rollins joining seems to be very high, just based on what we know at the moment, right? So that's where, we talk about kind of the full story picture for Roman Reigns and how he has been struggling with all of this, going from the tyrant, as he was labeled, to now, trying to be someone who is better and someone who's trying to kind of, turn over a new leaf here. But it's not been easy for Roman Reigns. And I think having Seth Rollins join, then you've got, Sami Zayn in there, who Roman's still going to wonder, can I really trust Sami Zayn? You've got Seth Rollins in there. And of course, you've still got Jay in there and Jimmy in there. And so it does kind of become much more, centralized on what Roman Reigns is going to do in this match. But not only that, but what could someone on his own team do to Roman Reigns in this match, given the history? What's going to be kind of the breaking point for someone on that team? And do we see that, to which does allow, Solo and company to get the win in this War Games match? So there's a lot going on here in terms of that, because you do connect the dots and you think, all right, Bronson Reed's going to be on one side. We know what that means elsewhere. And you kind of tie that in to, Jay telling Roman to make the call, right? He's telling Roman, look, you got to make the call. And so, end of the episode, Roman makes the call, right? But who does he call? He calls the wise man. And the way they kind of set it up here was, you don't really know yet who Roman's going to call. Like, he's kind of sitting there and you're thinking, okay. And then he goes to say it and almost like he hesitates for a second. He's like, all right, call the wise man. Like, you're wondering, okay, is he going to say call Seth Rollins, right, or something like that, which that seemed to be, part of the way that it was being teased based on Bronson Reed's involvement and everything like that. But what happens, right? Roman Reigns calls the wise man, but the number has been disconnected. I hate when that happens, when the number is no longer in service and you can't get in touch with this person. And so that's kind of the, you go from like the ultimate high for Roman Reigns. You see the smirk on his face as he's calling the wise man, thinking, all right, this is it. We're finally going to get all this, settled, right? But then the number's been disconnected. And so you immediately see the facial expressions of Roman Reigns turn to just complete disappointment. And I thought that was kind of a great visual to go from that complete 180 in a span of 5 seconds. And so I think now, again, the question becomes, what is going to be the next step for Paul Heyman in this thing? I know you guys have weighed in with your thoughts on how this thing could play out, but I've seen some people kind of debate this since that segment on Friday, but it's hey, Solo Sikoa destroyed, Paul Heyman's phone, right? The man just hasn't got his plan back together yet. Hasn't got himself a new phone. Number has been disconnected. And I've seen some people say, well, maybe that's for a reason, right? Because Heyman doesn't want Solo to find him. He doesn't want Jacob Fatu to find him. So Heyman is just kind of, laying back in the dark here until the time is right. He's the wise man. He knows exactly what to do next. It's just he's keeping everyone in the dark. And you also have the things that happened between Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman after WrestleMania 40, and even Heyman admitting and not talk to Reigns and, trying to reach out, and there's no Roman Reigns, right? He's not coming to the aid of Paul Heyman. He wasn't there to save Paul Heyman when he got the Shield powerbomb through the table at Madison Square Garden. Where was Roman Reigns? Why was he not back then to help and make sure that didn't happen, right? So there can still be some of those kind of, tough feelings to get through for these two. And I've also seen people discuss, hey, are we going to get perhaps a shocking moment where The Rock comes back at Survivor Series? Maybe you have that, the War Games match, however it settles out, right? Whoever wins, whatever the scenario is, it leads to The Rock coming back. And then do we get the wise man come back and maybe, all of a sudden somehow the wise man's on the Rock side of this thing, and that kind of, something leads to the next big chapter of this story that we didn't see coming, this mind-blowing development. These are all things that I assume are in play, right, when you talk about this story, and it's because, again, you're tying in all the different relationships, and I think that's what's made this thing so strong. It's not just the people that are in it, it's the relationships between the people that are in it, and they're all so very complicated, and so that makes for, more suspenseful television week to week, because you just have everyone who has a different motivation for what they're wanting to achieve, and you're going to have that same thing as we go into War Games, especially for Roman Reigns' team. Everyone is still kind of in a new spot now, even though they want us to think that this is the old bloodline, right? But everyone has changed since then, and so how are they going to make those kind of decisions that are going to impact what happens in the match? And like we said, now you've got potentially the wild cards added in, of Bronson Reed on one side, Seth Rollins on the other side, and how does that add kind of a new dynamic to things? And I mentioned, I don't think it's going to be everyone's favorite thing that you're having those two, added to this match, but it is a big opportunity for Bronson Reed, like I said, and it at least does, tie in something in terms of the Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns thing, and if they're trying to bring this Reigns kind of psyche full circle here, well, that adds another kind of historical element to it. So I can see why that they would do that, because they clearly have something else in the works, and so also think about The Rock's reaction to this whole thing. If we're building to Roman versus The Rock, how's The Rock going to react to not only seeing Roman Reigns team with Cody Rhodes, but now how's he going to react to seeing Roman Reigns team with Seth Rollins? And trust me, I know Rollins said he would never team with Roman Reigns, and that's the thing we got to figure out. How are they going to get around that? But if that's how this happens, how do we think The Rock's going to, what's the final boss going to say about that? He's not going to like that too much, I think, after already making his return at Bad Blood, kind of giving the signal, the stare down with Reigns there. And now, what if it's Seth Rollins? What if it's Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins standing tall after this Bloodline War Games match at Survivor Series? And then how does that spark the return of The Rock? And what kind of scenarios are put in play there? So a lot of things still to determine, and we'll find out. Like I said, if you've read the spoilers on Raw, you know we're going to get more development with this, but we'll find out exactly what's going to happen. I know, like, this is the way they're adding in all of these kind of mysterious things with Heyman, and, you know, we're wondering if The Rock's going to show up, all that kind of stuff. It does add a lot more intrigue to this match, and so, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, to see what happens here and what's the next chapter with this Bloodline story, because it's going to be a big one, because now we're getting closer and closer to WrestleMania season, and so if you're going to really jumpstart whatever the matches are going to be, the main events for WrestleMania 41, you know, you've got to really kick that in gear starting at Survivor Series. So we'll see what happens there. But elsewhere on this show, I mentioned Cody Rhodes. You had him kind of requesting the face-to-face with Kevin Owens. You didn't get that this week, but we are going to get that next week. So we wondered how Cody was going to react to, you know, what Kevin Owens did to Randy Orton. And then you had Owens sending in the video on social media about how he tried to show up to the building again, but they wouldn't let him in, which Nick Aldis said he could not let Owens into the building until they figure out how they're going to, you know, stop basically what Kevin Owens is doing. Because this guy, as we mentioned, is just kind of willing to do anything now. And so now, though, we are going to get that face-to-face next week. Owens, against his best, you know, sort of belief, he says, I shouldn't show up next week, but he's going to show up, right? And he's just doing his job. And as you know, you did also get the segment between Cody and Aldis. You had Cody flat out stated, even though we've known this, right? Cody talking about how the blame falls on him. And we've kind of pushed that for a while now, right? Like, Cody is kind of the person responsible for what's happening here. And that's how Owens is using it against him. And eventually we think that's how Randy Orton's going to use it against him. And so they are pushing this injury for Orton, you know, as a serious deal. So you do wonder, how long is it going to be before we see Randy Orton back again? But I would think we'll see him back just in time to heat up that big match and big feud that we're going to get between Orton and Cody, which the more I think about it, I think you're looking at probably a multi-match feud between those two. Because if you're going to do this right, there's so many kind of things you can explore with the history and the friendship between these two as well. We talk about everything with the Bloodline, but you know, you would think that's going to be a multi-part thing where you're doing probably multiple stipulation matches at some point. So even if, let's say, that is the match for WrestleMania 41, depending on what is in store for Cody, I think right now, like, you have probably, if we are looking ahead for Cody at WrestleMania 41, you know, your biggest options are clearly something with The Rock, whether that's a one-on-one match or the triple threat with Reigns. You're looking at Orton, or you could potentially look at a match with John Cena. We know Cena's going to be in the Royal Rumble now. What if Cena wins the Rumble? I've given you my thoughts. If you go watch the video I did on the Royal Rumble, that's probably over a month ago now. I gave you my, you know, sort of pitch for why I think Cena actually is a great choice to win the Rumble. But you know, could you do that Cody versus Cena match? Is that another option for Cody? He's got a lot of things that he can kind of be, you know, heating up here. And so even though there was kind of a lull for a while with Cody, as we said, kind of that summer lull after winning at WrestleMania 40, now is where I think, you know, the Owens thing, and then maybe the Orton thing, and then you've got all these other possibilities. So I think this is where things start to, you know, heat back up for Cody Rhodes. And they definitely will next week when we get this face-to-face with him and Owens, which we know is going to lead to the rematch soon enough between those two. But elsewhere on this week's SmackDown, you had Shinsuke Nakamura return to set up seemingly the United States title, you know, picture now with LA Knight. Santos Escobar comes out. It seems like he wants to be the one to answer the open challenge. Instead, it's Berto who does it, and LA Knight gets the win there to retain the title. Shinsuke Nakamura comes back. He's dressed in all black there, and so they're clearly kind of pushing, you know, kind of a new version of Nakamura here upon his return. And you've kind of seen that with Triple H, right? He wants to get the best out of these guys and kind of get everyone maybe in their rightful spot in terms of what they need to be. Look at Tommaso Ciampa, right? We're seeing a different kind of Ciampa here where he's coming out and kind of finding his old version of himself that we saw in NXT and those kind of things. So I'm actually excited for Knight and Nakamura because I think this is something, as we said, LA Knight's United States title reign has not exactly, you know, been the most noteworthy yet in terms of just, you know, title defenses and those kind of things. We mentioned the long-running thing with Andrade and Carmelo Hayes, nothing against those guys, but the 7-match series just didn't do a whole lot for you because you didn't get a winner out of it, and neither man could beat him at Crown Jewel. So you kind of need something else here. for LA Knight. And I think, this is something where, this is an interesting new challenge for LA Knight against someone like Shinsuke Nakamura. So, and can you, heat Nakamura back up? I think that's another question. Always been a favorite of Triple H. We know that. And so, can you kind of heat him back up? I think that is something, too, that we wonder here as we get into this United States title picture. And I think that's it. You just got to have bigger and better challengers for Knight, because that's what makes the champion. It's the same thing we talked about with Cody, right? When you have this huge babyface that wins a title, has this huge triumph, he's got to have challengers that kind of keeps that, appeal going. And so we've had, maybe some people thought we had that dip with Cody's title reign. Have we had a little bit of that with LA Knight? But now I think this is something new, kind of sink his teeth into, and we'll see what happens with this feud between those two. But meanwhile, this was another show just like on Raw, and we've kind of seen too, as we talked about NXT, which I hope to start doing those reviews here on the channel soon. I might initially make some of the NXT reviews members only, just to kind of get some of you guys involved there, get some thoughts for our membership tier. But we've seen a lot of women getting a big opportunity here in terms of headlining shows and that kind of thing. And they went with the match between Nia Jax and Naomi in the main event. I thought they did a really good job in terms of just really selling you on the idea that Naomi's going to beat Nia Jax. Had a couple big near falls there towards the end of the match. You had everybody getting involved, whether it was Liv and Raquel attacking Bianca and Jade backstage. Tiffany Stratton comes out, gets involved. Bayley comes out to try to make the save. You got Candice LeRae, who comes out, ultimately is the one that allows Nia Jax to kind of take advantage. The crowd was really into those closing sequences there with Naomi, thinking she was about to win the championship. And they really kind of sold you on some of those near falls there, and with getting everyone involved and interfering. But I'll tell you, I'm going to do a video on this. I'm going to do a video on the state of the women's division in WWE, because you look at kind of the way things are set up right now. Think about the people who are not even back yet, right? The people who are actually, sidelined either with injury or stepped away, like a Becky Lynch. Charlotte Flair's still out there. The state of the women's division, all the big matches that you have available to you, I think is about as good as it's ever been in WWE, period. And so I think it's going to be interesting to keep looking at that moving forward. But Jax gets the win here, and we know, they're still kind of leading you in some different directions. And we also know these are part of some figures, as you look at the women's War Games match, who will be involved. And we know that's going to continue as well into Raw next week and as we go towards Survivor Series. So we'll get the official announcement on that in terms of the two teams for that match. But yeah, I really like the dynamic right now with the women's division. I think, for Nia Jax as the WWE Women's Champion, it's still all leading to something with Tiffany Stratton's cash-in. We just don't know when that's going to be. But if you do have a War Games type setup, that becomes more intriguing for what Tiffany Stratton could do to cash in, based on kind of the elements that are in play in a War Games match and that kind of stuff. So something else to keep in mind here when you do have the two champions, Nia Jax and Liv Morgan, potentially involved. So there's different ways you can go about this. So we'll see how it plays out there. But again, I think Naomi, they did a great job with that one. I mean, really want to kind of push that here. If you didn't watch it, I would say you probably know how the match ends. But watching it, first time live, they did a great job kind of selling you on her potentially winning that championship. So bravo to everyone involved on that. But elsewhere on SmackDown, as I look through my notes here, knowing that I've forgotten some. Oh yeah, speaking of the women's stuff, I was going to kind of segue that with the United States title thing, but we jumped to the main event. Bayley advances in the women's United States title tournament, so we know the bracket. They're doing the triple threat matches, which, by the way, I'm usually kind of an old school person where I'm like, I like just the one-on-one matches, but I actually like how they've been doing the triple threat matches for these tournaments that they've had, because I do think it adds kind of a little bit more of unpredictability to it, right? You have that third person in there, and also it gives them a way where they don't have to pin a certain person, which, let's call it what it is. That's helpful too, but I like the way they've been doing that. And I thought, the match they had with Bayley, Candice LeRae, B-Fab, again, I thought, another really good job. I mean, it's the first time we've seen B-Fab kind of in this spot in a while. And so, yeah, this is just showing you, I think the depth of the roster in the women's division and the different ways they can use them. Again, this has to be a one-on-one match. Different tag team kind of, matches, having these triple threat kind of matches. So, yeah, I think it's just, it shows you the development, I think, of the roster and knowing what they have in NXT right now. I mean, you've got some huge stars there who are eventually going to be the face of this division. yeah, I think it's really in a really good spot. So we'll have another championship. We're gonna have another tournament match next week. I think it's Bianca Belair versus Chelsea Green versus Blair Davenport, which we haven't seen Blair Davenport a bit too. So, and yeah, so I think that's something else that we'll have to kind of look at next week there on that show as we look at this tournament. And the only other thing I think we didn't mention was you did have the tag team championship match. The Street Profits and the Motor City Machine Guns didn't get a finish there because you did have Ciampa come out and continue his quest to destroy the tag team division. And his frustration with Johnny Gargano continues as well. So, as we said, kind of a sort of revamp here for Tommaso Ciampa as we move forward with his character here on SmackDown. But there you go, guys. There's some thoughts on this week's SmackDown. Let me know what you thought about this show. What do you think about the 5th members seemingly being in place for the Bloodline War Games match at Survivor Series? Do you like it? Do you not like them adding in a Bronson Reed and Seth Rollins potentially to this mix? How do you see this playing out with Paul Heyman? What's going to happen with the Wiseman? Is he coming back on Roman's side, or could he maybe be turning to the other side? Maybe there's some kind of respect for Paul Heyman after seeing what Solo Sikoa and Jago Fatu actually would do to him. Powerbombing through a table at Madison Square Garden. Maybe that somehow is Paul Heyman's way of seeing respect in the opposition. And does he return with The Rock? Any of these kind of options do you see in play here with that? Let me know your thoughts as always in the comments, guys. Always appreciate your feedback. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button on your way out as well. And again, more videos coming here soon. I told you, got a newborn, so we're just kind of getting by right now in terms of making sure we do the reaction videos for Raw and SmackDown, but being able to do a lot of new videos in between here in these first couple weeks, not been the easiest thing, so we'll try to get back on track here pretty soon. But again, I appreciate you guys as always, and let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown.